Pretend to be my wife. She didn't even know him. 1 second ago, Maya Collins was nobody. A broke waitress in a borrowed dress being laughed at by the rich guests of the Silvercrest Hotel's charity gala. And now, Dr. Adrian Wolfe, the billionaire neurosurgeon every woman in Chicago dreamed of, was standing in front of her, holding out his hand, saying the most insane words she had ever heard. Pretend to be my wife. The arrogant man who'd just humiliated her was still smirking nearby, until Adrian turned, his gray eyes slicing through the crowd. "You heard me," he said, voice like steel. "She's my wife." Gasps rippled through the glittering hall. Laughter died. Every eye was on them. Maya's heart pounded. She should have walked away, but something in his gaze stopped her. A silent plea, a spark of danger. What was he doing? And why did every part of her want to believe him? Stay with this story till the end, and don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. Whispers spread like wildfire through the ballroom. She's his wife? Since when? That girl? Maya stood frozen, her pulse roaring in her ears. She wanted to deny it, to say she didn't even know him, but Adrian's hand tightened around hers. His calm expression never cracked. "Vivian," he said smoothly to the elegant woman staring at them from across the room, "you've been asking me to settle down. Now you've met my wife." His mother's painted smile faltered. The air turned heavy. Cameras flashed. Someone laughed too loudly. Maya forced a trembling smile. Her heart hammered so violently it hurt. She felt like she was drowning in a dream she didn't understand. Adrian leaned in close enough for only her to hear. "Breathe. You're doing fine." She did as he said, unsure why she obeyed. Then, as suddenly as it began, the music returned, and people drifted away, still whispering. Maya wanted to disappear. Instead, she stood beside a stranger who had just changed her entire life with one sentence, and he acted like nothing had happened. When the orchestra played its final note, Adrian released her hand. "Thank you for playing along," he said quietly, slipping a sleek black card into her palm. "You'll understand soon." Before she could respond, he was gone, moving through the crowd, exchanging polite nods, and then vanishing into the night. Outside, Chicago's wind cut sharp through her thin dress. Streetlights shimmered on wet pavement. The words echoed in her mind like a haunting refrain. "Pretend to be my wife." She stared at the card, his name printed in silver, his phone number below it. Her fingers tightened until the edges dug into her skin. Why her? What game was he playing? A limo pulled away from the curb, its taillights glowing red before disappearing into the dark. The city noise swallowed the silence he left behind. Maya exhaled shakily. For the first time that night, she realized she was trembling, not from the cold, but from everything that had just happened. She didn't know it yet, but that single card would drag her into a world she had never imagined, and never truly escape. That night, sleep didn't come. When morning light finally broke, reality returned, with the smell of coffee and unpaid bills. Morning light spilled through the cracked blinds of her small apartment. The glamour of the gala felt like another universe. Maya slipped into her diner uniform, the fabric smelling faintly of coffee and bleach. The breakfast rush had already begun. Plates clattered, orders shouted. She smiled through exhaustion, balancing trays with practiced grace. At the counter, she checked her phone. Nothing. No call, no message. Maybe last night was just a strange illusion, a cruel dream. In the corner booth, her mother sat bundled in a sweater, a soft scarf around her neck. Maya slipped into the seat beside her during her break, handing her a cup of tea. "You should rest, Mom. The doctor said—" "I'm fine," her mother said gently, though the tremor in her hands betrayed her. Maya glanced at the pile of unpaid bills peeking from her apron. The medication cost had doubled again. She squeezed her mother's hand, whispering, "We'll be okay, Mom. I promise." But her eyes burned, because promises didn't pay hospital fees, and fairy tale strangers didn't walk back into real life. Or so she thought. The bell above the diner door chimed. Maya didn't look up at first. Just another customer, she thought. Then the entire room fell quiet. Conversation stopped. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Even the radio seemed to hush. She turned and nearly dropped her tray. Adrian Wolfe stood in the doorway, a dark gray suit against the dull linoleum and chrome. His presence didn't belong here. He scanned the room until his eyes found her. "Maya Collins," he said evenly, his deep voice cutting through the stunned silence. "We need to talk." Someone whispered, "Is that him?" Another waitress gawked. Maya's heart slammed against her ribs. She forced a shaky smile. "Dr. Wolfe, what are you—" "Outside," he interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. The world narrowed to the space between them. She wiped her hands on her apron, every step toward him feeling heavier than the last. The bell chimed again as the door closed behind them, sealing them away from the curious stares. And in that cold Chicago air, Maya realized, whatever had started that night at the gala wasn't over. It was just beginning. Outside the diner, the cold bit through Maya's thin uniform. Adrian stood a few feet away, his posture composed, his expression unreadable. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "What happened at the gala wasn't random." She crossed her arms. "You think?" He ignored the sarcasm. "I need someone I can trust. Someone outside my world. Pretend to be my wife, for 1 year." Maya blinked. "I'm sorry." "What?" He continued, voice calm but firm. "It's a public arrangement. Appearances at events, social functions. In exchange, I'll settle every debt under your name. Your mother's medical care, completely covered." The city noise faded. She stared at him, trying to read the man behind those gray eyes. "Why me?" "You kept your dignity when most wouldn't," he replied. "You're practical, predictable." Practical, predictable. The words stung. Her breath trembled. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." He held out a sleek folder. "Read it, then decide." The snow began to fall around them, silent and cold. Maya didn't move. She had never been offered salvation before, especially one that sounded so much like a transaction. Maya sat at her kitchen table, the folder open under the dim light. Legal terms filled every page. Dates, appearances, non-disclosure agreements. Her eyes caught on a bold line near the end. Article 11. Emotional Attachment Termination Clause. She read it twice. Then again. If either party develops genuine romantic feelings, the contract is void. All financial benefits immediately end. Her stomach tightened. "So even love is illegal now," she whispered. Her mother's soft cough came from the next room. Maya closed her eyes. Every page glared back at her, black and white, no mercy. She imagined his face, calm, cold, untouchable. What kind of man writes a rule like that? A man who doesn't believe in love. Her chest ached at the thought. On the table lay 2 choices: poverty and illness, or a deal with a man who treated affection like a disease. She stared at the pen resting beside the folder. Its silver tip gleamed like a dare, and she realized she didn't have the luxury of saying no. Adrian arrived the next morning. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Have you decided?" Maya looked at the folder clutched in her hands. "If I sign, my mother gets the care she needs?" "Yes," he said simply. "Every bill, every procedure." Her pulse quickened. The weight of desperation pressed hard against her chest. "I'll do it," she whispered. He set a tablet before her, the contract glowing in pale blue light. "Sign here." Her finger hovered over the line. The world seemed to slow. She thought of her mother's tired smile, of the diner, of the laughter at the gala. Then she pressed her name onto the screen. A soft chime. Accepted. Adrian nodded once, sliding the tablet back. "You'll move in tomorrow. My driver will pick you up at 8. When he left, the silence in the room felt heavier than before. Maya sank into her chair. The promise of money and safety should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like surrender. The next morning, Maya's new life began. The elevator opened to glass, marble, and silence. Adrian's penthouse overlooked Lake Michigan, its walls clear, its heart cold. He led her through without a glance back. "East Wing is yours," he said. "You'll have privacy. Staff will handle your wardrobe and schedule." Maya followed quietly. The air smelled faintly of steel and rain. She peeked through the massive windows. The city stretched below, glittering but distant. "This place doesn't feel real," she murmured. "It isn't meant to," he replied. He stopped at her door, his tone impersonal. "Breakfast is at 7. My assistant will brief you." She nodded, clutching her bag like a lifeline. When he left, the sound of his footsteps echoed down the hall, fading into nothing. Maya sank onto the edge of her bed. Everything was beautiful and utterly lifeless. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. Designer walls, empty eyes. She had traded survival for silence, and silence was louder than she ever imagined. The penthouse was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against the skin. Maya lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Through the wall, faint footsteps moved. Steady, measured. Adrian. She imagined him pacing his side of the apartment, the man who bought peace like property. The clock ticked softly. She turned, pulling the blanket to her chin. No words, no voices, just two strangers separated by luxury and a line they couldn't cross. Somewhere beyond the glass, the lake shimmered under the moonlight. She thought about her mother's voice, her small kitchen, the hum of life that used to fill her nights. Now there was only this, quiet, cold, and heavy with unspoken rules. Maya closed her eyes, wishing for sleep. But the silence between them had a heartbeat of its own, and in that stillness she knew neither of them was sleeping. 2 days later, the penthouse filled with strangers, stylists, designers, makeup artists. Maya sat still while they pinned her hair and zipped her into a black evening gown worth more than her entire apartment. When she finally looked in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize herself. She looked expensive, controlled, like one of them. Adrian entered quietly. His reflection appeared behind hers. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, with clinical detachment, he murmured, "Acceptable." The word should have stung. Instead, her heart tripped. He offered his arm, his hand brushing the small of her back. The touch was brief, but his fingers trembled. Neither of them acknowledged it. As they stepped into the car, the city lights blurred outside the window. Maya caught his reflection. Stoic, unreadable, but his jaw tight. Tonight, they would begin their first public act as husband and wife. She wasn't ready for how real it would feel. The gala was held in the marble atrium, every corner glittering with wealth. Adrian's hand never left her back as they moved through the crowd. To everyone watching, they were the perfect couple. He leaned in to whisper jokes that made her laugh, a sound even she didn't recognize. Vivian Wolfe stood across the room, eyes sharp behind her champagne glass. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that dissected rather than admired. "Mrs. Wolfe," someone greeted. Maya returned the smile automatically, hearing her new title echo in her head. Adrian's fingers pressed lightly on her waist, a signal. She looked up, caught the smallest flicker of warmth in his eyes before it vanished. For 3 hours, they played their parts flawlessly. Every smile rehearsed, every gesture timed. But when their hands brushed as they posed for a photo, the act blurred. The crowd disappeared. For one fragile second, she forgot to pretend. And that was the most dangerous thing she could do. Later that night, Vivian approached. Her pearls glimmered like armor. "Well, Adrian," she said, eyes sliding toward Maya. "You do surprise me." Adrian smiled politely. "Emily is the best surprise of my life," he replied, voice steady but his gaze softening. Before Maya could react, he leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. It was supposed to be for show, but the moment his lips touched her skin, time stopped. Her pulse stumbled. The world tilted. The cameras flashed. People laughed, but she didn't hear any of it. When he pulled back, his mask slipped for a fraction of a second. His pupils were wide, his breath uneven. Then, just as quickly, the wall returned. "Ready to go?" he asked, voice flat again. She nodded, but her chest ached. That kiss had been pretend. It had to be. So why did it feel so real? Back at the penthouse, the silence was unbearable. Adrian disappeared into his study. Maya changed out of the gown, the scent of his cologne still clinging to her skin. Through the walls, she heard footsteps, his, moving back and forth, restless. She sat by the window, watching snow drift past the glass. Somewhere in that vast, glittering city, normal people were falling asleep next to someone they truly loved. Her throat tightened. Across the hall, Adrian stood staring at the city lights fighting the same battle. That single kiss played on repeat in his mind, louder than logic, sharper than reason. He clenched his hands, forcing the thought away. It meant nothing. It was for appearances. But neither of them slept. They were two people living in the same house, each terrified of the same truth, that the act was beginning to feel real. A week later, exhaustion caught her. Maya woke dizzy, her throat burning, her skin hot. She blamed it on nerves, on pretending too much. But by noon, she was shaking. Adrian found her in the kitchen, pale and swaying. "You're sick," he said, his doctor's tone firm. "I'm fine," she whispered. "It's just a headache." He ignored her. In minutes, he canceled his surgeries, called his private chef, and turned into something she'd never seen before. Human. He guided her to bed, brought her water, checked her temperature with steady hands. 102, he muttered. "You've pushed yourself too hard." For hours, he stayed by her side, silent but watchful. When she drifted in and out of sleep, she felt his cool hand against her forehead, soothing, steady. Once, half awake, she whispered, "You're still here." "I'm here," he said softly. His thumb brushed her temple in a small, tender motion, then froze, as if realizing what he'd done. He pulled away, retreating into the dark, but it was too late. The line between duty and feeling had already been crossed. Adrian stood in the doorway, his hand still tingling from where it had touched her skin. The quiet hum of the city outside seemed distant, unreal. He had crossed the line, his own line. She stirred in her sleep, a soft sigh escaping her lips. The fever had eased, but her cheeks were still flushed. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt something closer to panic. When her eyes fluttered open, their gazes met. For one suspended heartbeat, neither moved. There was no contract, no distance, only two people seeing each other for the first time. His chest tightened. He pulled his hand back sharply, as if burned. "You need rest," he said, his voice clipped. Maya blinked, confusion flickering in her tired eyes. "Adrian." "Sleep." He turned before she could finish, retreating into the shadows of the hall. Behind him, her voice was a whisper he pretended not to hear. "Thank you." He didn't answer. He couldn't, because kindness had never been part of the agreement, and he was already in danger of breaking every rule he'd written. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, the air between them had changed. At breakfast, Maya sat across from him at the long marble table. The clink of silverware was the only sound. "Feeling better?" he asked without looking up from his tablet. "Yes, thank you," she said quietly. That was it. No mention of the night before, no trace of warmth. He hid behind reports. She stirred her coffee just to fill the silence. It was as if the fever, and his gentle touch, had never happened. When she left the table, he finally looked up, watching her go. The echo of her footsteps lingered in the room long after she was gone. Maya stood by the window in her suite, staring at the skyline. The penthouse was beautiful, but she had never felt more like a ghost. Across the hall, Adrian adjusted his tie, preparing for work. His reflection looked composed, untouched. But, beneath the perfect surface, both of them were fighting the same quiet truth. That indifference had become unbearable. 2 weeks later, Adrian's voice broke the silence. "We're leaving for California. There's a neurosurgery conference in Napa." Maya hesitated. "You want me to go?" He glanced at her briefly. "My wife is expected to attend." The private jet landed under golden sunlight. Rolling hills and endless vineyards stretched beyond the runway, too beautiful to feel real. At the hotel, she watched him blend effortlessly with other doctors, calm, respected, admired. She was the outsider again, the waitress in borrowed shoes. But when he turned to her and offered his arm, something in his eyes softened. "Ready, Mrs. Wolfe?" She nodded, ignoring the strange warmth the title stirred inside her. That evening, they stood together on a terrace overlooking the vines. The sunset painted everything gold, even the distance between them. For the first time in weeks, he smiled. Not polite, not rehearsed, just human. And Maya realized that pretending beside him was getting harder with every heartbeat. The next morning, a photographer from the hospital's media team met them for a lifestyle feature. "Let's get a few shots for the newsletter," she chirped, arranging them on a sunlit path lined with olive trees. Adrian's arm slipped around Maya's waist. It was supposed to be automatic, part of the act. "Closer," the photographer called. "Look at him like you love him." Maya's breath caught. She turned toward him. Adrian met her gaze. His usual mask faltered. There was no performance in the way he looked at her now, only something raw, searching, real. "Perfect," the photographer said, clicking the shutter. But the photo had already been taken, long before the camera flashed. They stepped apart slowly. Neither spoke. The air between them felt charged, fragile. As they walked back to the car, she whispered, "You didn't have to act like that." He looked straight ahead. "Neither did you." That evening, after the symposium dinner, they wandered away from the hotel. The streets of Napa were quiet, perfumed with the lavender and sun-warmed stone. They stopped at a small cafe that sold homemade gelato. She picked pistachio. He chose vanilla. They sat on the steps outside, watching the light fade. For once, they didn't talk about contracts or appearances. He told her about studying abroad in Italy, sleeping in cheap hostels, chasing surgeries instead of dreams. She told him about her mother's laughter, the smell of burnt toast, the way she'd always wanted to paint the ocean. He laughed softly, a sound that startled even him. "I don't remember the last time I talked like this." Maya smiled. Maybe because no one ever listened. He looked at her then, really looked, and something in him shifted. The doctor, the billionaire, the man who wrote rules against love, was gone. For that brief golden moment, only Adrian remained. After dinner, they wandered through narrow streets washed in silver moonlight. The air was soft, the sound of a violin drifting from a nearby piazza. Maya stopped, drawn to the music. Couples were gathered beneath hanging lights, swaying slowly. She turned to Adrian, smiling shyly. "It's beautiful." He nodded. "It is." For a moment, neither moved. The music swelled, a tender melody wrapping around them. His hand brushed hers, a fleeting touch that lingered too long. She looked up. Their eyes met. Time folded in on itself. He stepped closer, his breath warm against her skin. The space between them thinned to nothing. And then, they both froze. Adrian's expression changed, fear flashing across his face. Maya stepped back, her chest rising fast. They turned away almost at the same time, their silence louder than the music. The violinist's final note hung in the air, trembling like the moment they didn't take. Neither spoke on the walk back to the hotel, but the ghost of that almost kiss followed them both into the dark. The flight home felt endless, the silence between them heavier than the clouds outside. The flight home was quiet. Maya sat beside Adrian, staring out at the endless clouds. Every word between them felt dangerous. When they landed, the city was gray again, colder somehow. Back in the penthouse, he disappeared into work, and she into her thoughts. Days passed. They barely spoke except for the necessary lines of their performance. "Good morning." "The driver's waiting." Smile for the board. The distance between them had grown wider than ever, until one morning, while scrolling her tablet, Maya froze. A headline blazed across the screen. "Dr. Heartless's ex-wife speaks out." Her stomach dropped. The article teaser beneath it read, Alyssa Dane reveals the truth behind Chicago's most elusive billionaire. She clicked the link. The words hit like knives: cold, cruel, public. Adrian Wolfe, unfeeling, obsessive, incapable of love. Maya's hands trembled. She didn't know what was worse, the lies themselves, or the thought of him seeing them. For the first time she felt protective. Fiercely, irrationally protective. The full piece was brutal. Alyssa painted Adrian as a monster, a man who destroyed lives with the same precision he saved them in surgery. Every quote twisted the truth. Every story exaggerated, cruel. The comment section below was worse. Sociopath. Ice King. Heartless. Maya slammed the tablet shut, anger shaking her. She had seen the man Alyssa described, but she had also seen another one, the man who had stayed up all night to care for her, who laughed under a sunset, who almost kissed her under the moon. That man wasn't heartless. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and left. The elevator ride to his office felt endless. When the doors opened, she found him alone in the dim study, facing the city. He didn't turn around. "You've read it," he said flatly. "Yes," she whispered, "and it's all lies." He laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "Lies the world will believe." "Then let them," she said, stepping closer. "I won't." He finally looked at her, eyes dark and hollow. It was the first time she'd seen him look defeated. The city glowed behind him, but the room felt dark. A half-empty glass of whiskey sat on the table. Adrian looked nothing like the untouchable man from the headlines. His tie was undone, his eyes tired. "She's not wrong," he muttered. "I wrote a contract to keep love out of my life. What does that make me?" Maya took the glass from his hand and set it down. "It makes you scared, not cruel." He met her gaze, searching for disbelief. He found none. "You're not that man, Adrian," she said softly. "You're the one who stopped a gala to protect a stranger. The one who stayed up to save her from a fever. That's the truth." Something in him cracked. His shoulders slumped. His voice broke. "I don't know how to be that man anymore." She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Then let me remind you." Silence filled the room, heavy but alive. For the first time in years, Adrian Wolfe, Dr. Heartless, let himself cry. It happened before either of them could think. 1 second, he was looking at her with tears still wet on his lashes. The next, his hands were in her hair, his mouth on hers. It wasn't soft or careful. It was desperate, hungry. She gasped against him, then melted into the kiss, her hands gripping his shirt like she was afraid he might vanish. All the tension, all the restraint, they shattered. This wasn't performance. It wasn't pity. It was everything they'd both been denying since that night at the gala. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Their foreheads rested together. Reality crashed back. Adrian's voice came low, rough. "We broke the clause." Maya's heart twisted. "I don't care." But he did. She could see it in his eyes. The battle between love and control. He stepped back slowly, his chest rising with guilt and need. "This changes everything," he whispered. "Yes," she said, tears catching her breath. "It changes us." Adrian stepped back, breathing hard. His face was pale, his voice steady only because it had to be. "Clause broken," he said quietly. "Contract terminated." Maya's breath caught. "What?" He turned to his desk, fingers trembling as he opened his laptop. "All financial transfers will be completed by morning. You'll be free of obligation." Her heart shattered. "Obligation?" she repeated, tears spilling. "Is that what this was?" He didn't look at her. "It was never supposed to be more." "Then I broke it first," she said suddenly, her voice trembling but fierce. That made him freeze. "I fell for you before Florence, before everything." She stepped closer, her voice breaking. "So, if this is about honesty, I'm guilty too." Their eyes met. Raw, stripped, broken. For the first time his logic failed him completely. He wanted to tell her to stay. He wanted to beg. But all he could manage was a whisper. "You should go." And she did, leaving him standing in the silence he'd built for himself. A silence that now felt like punishment. The penthouse had never been so still. Her scent lingered in the air, faint and warm, mocking him. Adrian stood by the window, looking out at the frozen skyline. Below, Chicago moved on without him. He'd spent his life building walls, and now he was trapped inside them. Everywhere he looked, there were reminders. A sketchbook left on the counter, a coffee cup by the sink, her laughter echoing in the corners of his memory. He poured a drink, but didn't touch it. He didn't need more numbness. He needed her. But love wasn't logical, it wasn't safe, and it wasn't something he knew how to ask for. Across the city, Maya unpacked her old apartment. The walls were smaller, but her chest felt hollow. She told herself it was better this way, that freedom was what she wanted. But freedom without him felt like nothing at all. That night, they both lay awake in separate beds, staring into the dark. Neither one slept. Neither one had truly let go. A week later, the penthouse door opened without warning. Vivian Wolfe swept in, her heels clicking like gunfire on the marble floor. She stopped at the study doorway, her eyes narrowing at the sight of her son. "You look terrible," she said. Adrian didn't glance up. "I'm fine." She ignored the lie, pouring herself tea from the untouched tray. "So, I hear you managed to drive away the only woman who ever made you smile." He sighed. "It's complicated." "No," she said sharply. "It's cowardice." He looked up, startled. "You built a rule book to keep yourself safe," she continued. "But love isn't safe, Adrian. It's supposed to be terrifying." He stared at her, words failing. Vivian softened, her voice quiet. "That girl made you human again. Go fix what you broke." Then she set down her cup, brushed imaginary dust from her sleeve, and walked out. For a long moment, he stood frozen. Then he grabbed his coat and car keys. For once, he didn't plan. He just went. The bell above the door chimed. Maya looked up from the counter, and her heart stopped. Adrian stood there, out of place among the smell of coffee and frying bacon, his expensive suit wrinkled, his expression unsure. He walked up slowly, stopping a few feet away. "You found me," she whispered. He nodded. "I had to." He reached into his pocket and placed a single envelope on the counter. Inside was a plane ticket. "It's open-ended," he said. "Anywhere in the world. You can go, start over, never see me again." Her eyes filled. "You're setting me free?" He swallowed hard. "You already were." His voice softened. "But I hope you'll choose to stay." He paused, then added quietly, "You melted the ice I thought would protect me. Now I'm just me." He smiled, small and broken. "And I think I like who that is, because of you." He turned to leave. But this time it wasn't pride holding him back. It was fear. Fear that she wouldn't stop him. Hours later, Adrian sat in his study, staring at the city lights. The ticket still lay on the bar where he'd dropped it. The elevator chimed. He froze. Then, footsteps. "Maya?" he whispered. She stood in the doorway, calm and certain. "You gave me a ticket to the world," she said. "But I already have my world. It's here, with you." He crossed the room in 2 strides, disbelief breaking into relief. "I thought I lost you," he murmured. "You just had to find me," she said, smiling through tears. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. No clauses, no conditions, no end date. Her breath caught as he knelt. "Marry me. For real this time." She nodded, tears spilling freely. "Yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, his voice low. "Love isn't a contract, Maya. It's the only rule worth breaking." She laughed softly. "Then let's break it, every day." If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in second chances.